I'm supposed to deem it as so. This is what James is telling us to do. This brings about a whole nother perspective of when we think about joy. He says, consider it joyful, consider it an opportunity. Be excited about it when your faith is being tested. And when I look back on my life, there were many times where I wasn't excited that my faith was being tested because I feel like I just came out of my faith being tested. Can I get a break, God? But I don't believe God allows us to have these breaks that we think we need or we expect to have. Why? Because the enemy's not taking a break. He's like, I need you to get back in the fire because I need to continue pruning you because there's something that the enemy is trying to stop you from and there's something that I'm trying to lead you to. And so I need you to consider it as joy that I'm growing you for what I promised you. And so God allows us to be challenged to see how we're going to consider it. Are we going to consider it as a moment of joy? Or are we going to consider it as a moment of hopelessness? Are we going to consider it as a moment of joy? Or are we going to consider it as a moment to where we have an opportunity to sin? He's allowing us to be challenged to see how we're going to consider it. And so there's a reason we're supposed to consider our trials as a moment of joy. If we go back to verse 3, watch what it says. It says, because you know, this is the reason, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. He says, consider it great joy when your faith is being tested. Why? Because you know. Because you know. Somebody say, because I know. My question is, what do you know? We talked about this in the first week of this series. We talked about that rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. That rejoicing in the Lord means I am going to rejoice in God's reality over my reality. But in order to understand God's reality, guess what? I have to know God's reality. And so it's very difficult for me to rejoice in God's reality if I don't know God's reality. And so knowing the Lord is joy in the Lord. In other words, I'll say it like this. Here's the point. I can only consider what I know. I can only consider what I know. So the question is, what do I know? Because I can't consider it great joy if I don't know what to be joyful about in the Lord. In other words, I say it like this. I can't consider it joy when I'm sick if I don't know that he's Jehovah Rapha, my healer. I can't consider it joy when I'm trapped in a situation if I don't know him as Jehovah Mephalti, my deliverer. I can't consider it joy when I'm anxious and when I'm worried and when I'm concerned about things if I don't know him as Jehovah Shalom, my peace. I can't consider it joy when I'm in this position where I'm lacking and things aren't adding up and the numbers aren't numbering and the math isn't mathing if I don't know him as Jehovah Jireh, my provider. It's all about what I know. I can only consider what I know. So my question to you is, what do you know? What do you know? I'm challenging you today. What do you know? Because that's what you can consider when it's time for you to have joy, when you're faced in the trials and your faith is being tested. Yes. You're going to get through it based on what you know. So if I could just take a tangent real quick, there's two ways to know. The first way to know is I have experienced who God is. That's the first way how you know. I've seen him heal the sick. Matter of fact, he's healed me. Or I've seen him, I've experienced a peace that surpasses all understanding. I've had an experience with God, or maybe I've had a moment to where I've seen him set the table before me in the presence of my enemies. See, I've seen him do a great work, or I've seen him, one of our members said this in Equip class, and I don't know, this scripture has just been resonating with me ever since she said it. It says, when the enemy comes in like a flood, he'll raise a standard against. I've seen that God raise a standard against the enemy. And so I've experienced him. Many of us already know God through experience. The problem is we just got to remind ourselves of it. I was telling them in the Equip class, shameless plug, Wednesday nights, 7 o'clock, join us. I was telling them in the Equip class that, hey, I have this thing called a gratitude journal where I write things down that I'm grateful what God has done for me. So on the days where I'm struggling, On the days when my faith is being tested, I can go and look back in this journal and remind myself of who I know God is, because I've experienced him being a provider. I've experienced him being my peace. I've experienced him being my vengeance and my recompense. I've experienced him being everything that I need him to be.